It was a scene Britain never imagined would unfold so quickly. Within the still, chapel walls of St. George's on 10 August 2025, a visibly moved King Charles placed the royal seal and state ring into the hands of his heir. The atmosphere was weighted with history, sorrow, and inevitability, and with only a handful of solemn words, Charles carried out what few believed. He named Prince William the nation's king in every way but ceremony. A private rite that altered the future. That early afternoon of the 10th of August 2025. The iron gates of St. George's Chapel, Windsor were quietly secured. Outside, sunlight broke faintly through the summer haze. Yet inside the stone sanctuary the mood was dense with anticipation. Only 14 chosen figures, royals and senior officials were allowed to observe what palace aides now refer to as the silent shift king. Charles stood close to the altar, his palms resting on a velvet case containing two of the crown's most powerful symbols. Though no cameras rolled and no cheers were heard, the gravity of the hour was beyond doubt. At precisely 2:15 p.m., the Archbishop of Canterbury stepped forth holding a folded document. His words rang against the vaulted arches as he proclaimed a brief yet historic declaration: William, by the sovereign's will, confirmed in title and duty. It was a constitutional right, wrapped in centuries of ritual. Prince William, wearing a dark navy suit, kept his eyes locked on his father. The only sound was the faint swish of robes as the Archbishop retreated, leaving father and son face to face in silence. No television lens captured it, by Charles' strict decree. Instead, a lone royal photographer stood near the choir stalls, her camera recording the raw emotion of the moment. Charles' eyes glistened, his grip on the velvet case tightening before he finally extended it toward William. The royal seal and the ring of state, treasures handed down through monarchs for nearly 9 decades, now became William's to protect. This was not mere ritual. It was the visible transfer of living authority, clothed in ancient meaning. By 4 p.m., the gathering concluded. The witnesses departed through the side cloister, their steps muted by thick carpets laid to absorb the sound. Yet, silence could not contain the weight of what had passed. Before twilight had fallen on Windsor's Long Walk, a senior official had already rung a trusted contact at the Times. By evening, the whispers were front-page news. Charles had entrusted William with the emblems of sovereign power.
Charles had
Britain
given William
stood
the
on the
symbols
edge of a royal turning point.
Britain was
Though
on
the
the
public
verge of
had
a
not
royal
seen it
turning
with
point,
their own eyes,
and the public had not even
the quiet
seen the moment
dignity of
happen.
the 10th of August
The quiet
2025
dignity of 10
concealed
August
a harder truth.
2025 masked
This
a
moment
deeper
was
truth.
not about ceremony
This ceremony
or tradition.
was not simply about timing
It was
or
about
tradition.
necessity.
It was about
By the
necessity.
time May 2025 arrived, the king's doctors were voicing urgent concern. They noted not only his growing fatigue but frequent episodes of illness that began to hinder official duties. Even brief meetings in the study at Clarence House left Charles noticeably weakened. Medical advice was direct: cut back heavily on engagements, avoid distant travel, and limit ceremonies to the barest minimum. The warning was sharp: either conserve his strength now, or risk a complete collapse before Christmas 2025. The first visible hints of frailty had already surfaced earlier that summer. At Trooping the Colour, a central fixture of the royal year, the task was quietly handed to William. More rumours spread in June when Charles abruptly cancelled 2 meetings with foreign dignitaries. Insiders whispered it was more than just physical exhaustion, it was also the weight of private turmoil. In July, the subtle but undeniable retreat of Queen Camilla from the public eye left Charles subdued, his posture slightly bent at appearances. Those close to him recall a private moment in early August 2025 when Charles, leaning heavily against his desk, told a long-serving aide, "I want my son settled before my time ends." The words were not theatrical nor self-pitying. They were deliberate, almost businesslike. Charles had seen too often how sudden shifts plunged the monarchy into uncertainty. He would not allow his heir to inherit chaos unprepared. The decision was sealed. William would step into sovereign responsibility at once, even while the law still named Charles as reigning king. It is important to stress, this was no formal abdication. The Regency Act of 1937 allows a transfer of duties without requiring a monarch to step down. On paper, Charles remained the sovereign. But in practice, Britain now lived with two kings, one by law, the other in action. And for Charles, this was never about clinging to a crown, it was about safeguarding continuity. The king's health crisis forced the calendar. Yet it was symbolism that gave the act its weight. Authority could have been signed away quietly, with files and palace notes. But Charles chose a different path. He chose to make it personal, to bind the moment with symbols the monarchy has always lived through. On the 10th of August 2025, the objects he placed into William's hands were not mere ornaments. They were vessels of history. And with them, he slipped in one final touch, a handwritten message, turning protocol into a father's farewell. The sovereign seal has stood as part of Britain's royal identity since the coronation of George VI in 1937. Fashioned in gold and set on polished oak, it is the mark that validates all state documents in a monarch's name. That Charles handed it directly to his son, rather than through an aide, spoke louder than any speech. Alongside it lay the ring of state, a gem-studded band, last worn by Queen Elizabeth II during her final state opening of Parliament in 2022. Such a moment had echoes in history, though few in living memory. Scholars point back to 1910, when the ailing Edward VII summoned George V to his bedside to prepare him for the throne. Charles, steeped in royal precedent, knew the weight of that parallel. Yet he added something uniquely his own. Within the velvet case was a small ivory envelope. In his familiar slanted script were the words, "Guard it as you would guard your mother's name." By invoking Diana's memory, Charles shifted the act from ritual into personal. Witnesses recall William's reaction, his blinking quickened, his jaw set, and his left hand instinctively covered the note as if to shield it from view. Those who know him say his mother's name remains both a source of pride and a well of sorrow, nearly 3 decades after her passing in 1997. The seal and ring carried the burden of role. The note carried the measure by which to live it. By entrusting both historic regalia and an intimate message, Charles bound 2 worlds, the constitutional and the private. This was not only the passing of authority. It was the passing of a legacy shaped by family, duty, and remembrance. For William, the velvet box weighed far beyond metal and jewels. It was the trust of his father, and the memory of his mother, bound together and handed to him in silence.
And the
silence
intimate.
Of St. George's
This was
Chapel
not
on
just
the
about
10th of
passing a
August
crown-shaped
2025 broke
It was
only when
about
William
passing a
finally
legacy
spoke.
bound by family,
His words,
duty,
steady yet
and memory.
quiet, were,
For
"You've
William,
given me more than
the
a
weight
crown.
of that velvet box was
You've
more
given
than
me a
gold
standard
and
to
jewels.
keep. These were not
It was his
rehearsed
father's
lines.
trust
They carried the plain
and his
voice
mother's
of a son
name,
to his father,
carried
a man
forward
who had
into a
worn the
future
crown for
that
3 years
began
amid
the
scandal
moment he
and
accepted
strain.
them.
In that instant,
William's response
thoughts
to his
turned
father.
to 2 figures, Queen Elizabeth II,
The
whose
stillness
reign had
inside
defined
St.
stability
George's
for
Chapel on
7
10
decades,
August
and Princess
2025
Diana,
was
whose
broken
memory
only when
remained
Prince
a guiding
William spoke.
flame. He
His voice
vowed
was
to
low
uphold
but
both
steady
their
as he
legacies,
told his
binding
father,
past and future
"You've given
in
me
one
more
promise."
than a crown.
His tone,
You've given
according
me
to one
a
courtier,
standard
was
to
less
keep.
princely and more
The
soldierly
words
firm,
were not
measured,
rehearsed.
and free of
They had the
sentiment.
weight of a son
Yet
speaking
beside
to a
him,
man who
Catherine's
had carried the
quiet
crown
presence
for
softened
3
the
years
moment.
through scandal
Dressed
and
in
strain.
deep blue,
For
she
those
reached across
present,
and gently
the remark
squeezed
seemed
his
to
hand.
close one chapter
It lasted
and open
only
another.
a second, almost
In that
unseen,
moment,
but more
William's
than one
mind was on 2
eyewitness
figures.
noticed.
Queen
To them,
Elizabeth
it was
II,
proof that this
who had
reign
embodied
would
the
not be
monarchy
carried
for
by
70
one
years,
alone, but led
and
as a
Princess
pair.
Diana, whose
Before the
memory
gathering
remained a
ended,
guiding light.
William added one
He
last
promised
pledge
to
his
uphold the
father,
legacies
that
of
he
both,
would consult him
binding
on
the
every
past to the
major
future in a
constitutional
single
matter.
pledge.
He
His
framed
tone,
this new
according to one
arrangement
courtier,
not as a replacement,
was more
but as
soldier
a
than
shared
prince,
stewardship,
firm,
words rarely
respectful,
spoken in royal
but without
circles.
sentimentality.
It was a reminder that
Yet his wife's
this was not
silent
an
presence
end,
added
but a
an
joint
unspoken
guardianship
tenderness to the
until
exchange.
Charles's final day.
Catherine,
William's
seated beside
first
him in a
words
deep
as
blue
acting
dress,
sovereign were
reached
deeply
across and
personal.
squeezed his
But
hand.
Catherine's
The
unspoken
gesture,
support would
brief
soon take
and
on
almost
greater
hidden,
weight.
was noticed
Within
by
hours
more
of
than
the
one
ceremony,
eyewitness,
she was being
who
prepared
described
for
it as
role she
a
had
moment
long
of
anticipated,
unspoken
though
unity.
never under such
To
sudden
them,
terms.
it was the physical
The morning
proof
after
that
the
this would be
Windsor
a reign
handover,
led not
Catherine
by
was summoned
one
to
monarch,
Clarence House for
but by a
private
united
session.
pair.
At 9
That
a.m.
private
on
assurance
the 11th of
would
August
soon be tested in the
2025,
public arena.
She entered the green,
But within the
drawing
chapel
room where
walls,
King Charles
it
and
was a
two
vow
senior
only they
officials
could
awaited
understand.
her. Over
Before the
next
gathering
hour,
ended,
she was formally
William
briefed
made
on
one
her
final
expanded
promise to his
responsibilities
father,
as Queen, Consort
that he
in
would
waiting
consult
and
him
as
on
a
all major constitutional
safeguard for the reign
matters.
to come.
He framed the new
These
arrangement
roles were not
as a
ceremonial
replacement,
labels.
but
They
as a
carried
joint
real weight,
stewardship,
including the authority
a phrase
to
that
preserve
struck
royal
those present as
prerogatives
unusual
during
in
William's
royal
absences.
circles.
At the
It
end of
hinted
the meeting,
that this was
Charles
less a
presented her
handover
with a
and
sapphire
more a
brooch
shared
once
guardianship
belonging to
until
Princess
Charles's
Diana.
final day.
The jewel, a
It was a
gift from the
balance
Saudi
between
royal
duty
family
and
in
deference,
1981
set
had
from the
rested
very
in the
start.
palace vaults 4 decades.
William's first words,
Passing
as
it
the
to
active
Catherine,
head of
Charles
state,
offered no
were
speech,
personal and
only
pointed.
the quiet
But it
remark
was
that
Catherine's
one day
quiet
belonged to
presence
Princess
that would soon
Charlotte.
take on new
Those who
significance.
witnessed the moment
Within
saw it as a
hours of the
gesture
ceremony,
deep trust,
she was
linking
being
Catherine
prepared for a
directly to
role she had
Diana's
long
legacy.
trained for, though
Almost
never under such
immediately,
sudden
palace
circumstances.
language shifted.
The palace
In
had already
private
decided
memos,
she was
Catherine
more
was
than a consort
described as
in
Her
waiting.
Majesty designate,
By
a
11
title
August
unused since
2025,
early 1952,
her status would be
when
elevated
Elizabeth
both privately
returned
and
from Kenya
publicly,
as Queen in
placing
waiting.
her at the very
Though not
center
released
of the
publicly,
monarchy's
the
future.
change reached journalists who hinted
Catherine's
at it in early
elevated
reports.
role.
On social media,
The morning
reaction
after the
was
Windsor
swift and warm.
ceremony, Catherine was summoned to a
praised for
private
her
briefing
calm
at Clarence
composure
House.
during years of palace
It was
storms.
9 o'clock a.m. on 11
timing of
August
her rise was
2025 when she
With
entered the
William
green
taking
drawing
on
room,
sovereign powers,
where King
the
Charles
monarchy
and 2
needed a
senior
figure of
courtiers were
stability.
waiting.
The public already
Over the
trusted.
next hour, she was
Catherine
formally
fit
briefed on her
perfectly.
new
Her
responsibilities as
discipline
Queen
and
Consort
quiet
in waiting
endurance gave her
and
strength
constitutional
without
guardian for
controversy.
the reign to
For
come.
Charles,
These were
elevating
not
Catherine's
ceremonial
role was
titles.
as much about
They carried the
protecting
weight
the
of
monarchy's
real
image as it
constitutional
was about
oversight,
preparing for
including
the
the
coronation
safeguarding
ahead.
of royal
Yet,
prerogatives
as
during
William
William's
and Catherine
absences.
stepped into their
At the close
reshaped
of the
positions,
meeting,
the rest
Charles
of the family
presented
was
Catherine with a
quietly
sapphire
informed.
brooch
Their
that had once
reactions were
belonged to
mixed,
Princess
but two
Diana.
voices stood out.
The jewel,
One was
a gift
Princess
from the
Anne.
Saudi royal
The
family in
other, from across the
1981,
ocean, was
had been
Prince
stored in the
Harry.
palace vaults
When
for
word of the
decades.
Windsor ceremony reached
Handing it to
Princess
her,
Anne,
Charles
she did
made
not
no
pause.
grand speech.
In
Only a
private
quiet
conversation
remark
with
that it
aides,
should remain in
she
the family
called it the
for
right
Princess
step at
Charlotte
the
one
right
day.
time as the most
Those
seasoned
present
royal after
interpreted the
Charles.
act as
She
a deep
grasped the
gesture of
urgency of
trust,
preparing William
linking
without
Catherine
delay.
directly to
Her
Diana's
support
legacy.
went beyond words.
Almost immediately,
By the 11th
palace
of August
communications
2025,
shifted.
She had
In
agreed to
internal
guide William
memos,
personally
Catherine
through
was referred to
ceremonial
as
protocol
Her
until
Majesty
the formal
Designate,
coronation.
a term that had not
Prince
been applied
Harry,
to
by
anyone
contrast,
since the
received
early
the
months of
news via a private
1952,
video call
when
from
Elizabeth
California.
II had returned from
Sources say the
Kenya
exchange
as Queen
was
in
cordial
waiting.
yet short,
The change
lasting
was
less
not
than
for
10
public
minutes.
release,
Harry offered
but word soon
congratulations,
reached
but
select
also
journalists
voiced concern
who
about
hinted at the
increased
development in
media
early news
intrusion into
pieces.
William and
Social
Catherine's
media
lives.
reacted with a wave of
Though
praise
polite,
for
the tone
Catherine,
underscored the
applauding her
distance both
composure through through the past years of royal
and the
scandals.
heart of the royal fold.
The timing of her elevation
Anne's
was
active
deliberate.
role reinforced
With
her
William
image
stepping into
as the
sovereign
monarchy's
duties,
anchor.
the monarchy
Harry's
needed a
detached
stabilizing
response
figure
highlighted
the public
his
already
separation
trusted.
from its core.
Catherine fit the
Public
role
debate quickly
seamlessly.
drew a sharp
Her
line
reputation
between
for
Anne's
discipline and
hands-on
quiet
loyalty
endurance
and
meant
Harry's
she
life
could carry
abroad.
the weight of expectation
Observers framed
without
it as
stirring
yet another
controversy.
contrast in how
For
each
Charles,
sibling related
ensuring
to the
Catherine's
institution.
central role was as much
Behind
about
palace
securing the
doors,
monarchy's
efforts were
image
made to show
as it was
unity.
about preparing for the
Even
inevitable
Harry's private
coronation
letter
to
William,
come.
which mixed
While
congratulations
William and
with
Catherine's
caution
roles
was
were being
acknowledged as
reshaped
a
within
positive
palace
gesture.
walls, the rest of
Yet
the family was
contrast
also
in
brought into the
visibility
loop.
was undeniable.
Reactions varied,
While Anne
but one
stood
voice
beside
stood
William
out
in
for
key
its steadfast
briefings, Harry
support.
remained thousands
Princess
of miles away.
Anne.
In
Another
the royal
came
family,
from far
presence
away,
often speaks
Prince
louder
Harry,
than sentiment.
whose
On
distance
the
from
12th
royal
of
life
August
was
2025,
underlined by the way
palace
he
released
received the
a
news.
brief yet weighty statement.
These responses,
In just
though private,
142
would quickly shape
words,
public
it confirmed
narratives
what
about
had
loyalty,
occurred inside
unity,
St. George's
and the
Chapel
fractures
King
that still
Charles had
lingered
entrusted
within the
certain
House of
sovereign
Windsor.
responsibilities to the Prince of Wales.
Anne and Harry's
It further
reactions.
clarified that this act was temporary in law
When news
but
of the
lasting
10
in
August
spirit.
2025
The wording
ceremony
left no
reached
doubt.
Princess
William
Anne,
was now
she did
acting
not
sovereign,
hesitate.
though Charles
In a
retained
private
the crown in
conversation
name.
with aides, she
The
described it
statement
as
closed with a
the
striking
right step
line,
at the
His
right
Majesty
time.
remains the king.
As the most experienced
His Royal
working
Highness
royal
acts
after
with his
Charles,
blessing
she
and
understood the
authority
urgency
as
of
preparation
preparing
for
William
the reign
for the
to
crown.
come. This was the palace's
Her
effort
support was
to
not
avoid
only
the
verbal.
word abdication,
By 11
which
August
still carried heavy
2025,
echoes of Edward
she had
VIII.
agreed
In
to personally guide
1936.
William through the maze of
Yet for the
ceremonial
public, the
protocol
message was
until the formal
unmistakable.
coronation took
A
place.
transition
In
had begun.
contrast, Prince Harry received the
announcement,
news through a
broadcast
private
at
video
noon,
call
was
from
immediately
California.
followed by
The
William
conversation,
and Catherine's
according to
first
palace
joint
sources,
appearance in
was
their
cordial
new
but
roles.
notably brief,
At
lasting
Buckingham
less
Palace,
than
they
10
stepped
minutes.
onto the balcony for a
Harry offered his
simple wave.
congratulations, but also
No
voiced
speeches were
concerns
given,
about
no
increased
procession
media
followed.
intrusion into William and
Yet
Catherine's
the crowd
lives.
that gathered below
While
estimated
polite,
at more
the
than
tone
40,000
underscored the
within
distance,
the first hour erupted
both
in
physical
cheers.
and emotional,
Observers
between him
remarked
and
on
the
the
core of the
symbolism.
royal family.
William wore a dark
Anne's
suit
active
with a
role in the
muted,
transition
navy tie,
reinforced her
reflecting
image
restraint.
as the
Catherine
monarchy's anchor,
appeared
while
beside
Harry's
him in a
measured
white
but
dress
remote
with a
response
sapphire brooch,
fueled
echoing
comparisons
Diana's
between the
earlier
siblings'
style.
dedication.
The visual
Public
message
discussions
was clear,
quickly drew a sharp
continuity,
line
stability,
between Anne's
and a
hands-on
connection to
loyalty
memory.
and Harry's
Within hours of the
detached
palace
life
statement,
abroad.
The House of Commons
For many
was summoned.
observers, it became
Prime
yet another
Minister
example of
Alexander
how
Grant
different
rose at
branches
2
of the
p.m.
family
to deliver a
relate to the
motion of
institution
loyalty.
itself.
In careful
Behind the
words,
scenes,
he praised
the
Charles
palace
for his
worked
grace
to
and
present a
foresight
united
in
front.
preparing the throne,
Even
while
Harry's
pledging
private
full
letter to
support
William,
as acting
expressing
sovereign.
both congratulations
The motion,
and caution,
passed without
was
dissent, a
quietly
rare display
acknowledged
of unity
as a
in
positive
chamber
gesture.
often marked by
Yet
division.
the contrast in
In the
visibility
House of
remained.
Lords, the atmosphere
As Anne
was
stood at
equally
William's
solemn.
side in key meetings
Senior
and
peers
rehearsals,
recalled
Harry
similar
was
handovers
thousands
in
of
Britain's
miles
past,
away,
though none as
his
orderly
role
or as
confined to
peaceful as
words on
this.
paper.
Several drew
It was a
parallels to
reminder
George
that
VI
in the royal
preparing
family,
Elizabeth in the late
proximity
1940s,
often speaks
noting
louder
that the
than
monarchy
sentiment.
seemed to repeat its rhythms in moments
The public
of strain.
reveal.
The Speaker of the Commons closed
By the morning of
session with a
11th
line
August
that carried into the
2025,
evening
the
headlines,
speculation
"The
that had
crown
been brewing
remains
since the Windsor
unchanged,
ceremony
though the hands
finally
that bear
broke
its
into the
duties
open.
now shift
At
newspapers
10:00
seized on
a.m.,
it instantly,
Buckingham Palace
splashing it
released an
across
official
front page from
communique
London to
declaring
Edinburgh.
Prince William king
Across
in
the
all but
oceans,
coronation.
reaction was swift.
The carefully worded
In Canada,
statement
Prime
avoided the
Minister
word
Louise
abdication,
Tremblay welcomed the
instead
news as a
using
wise
the
and careful
constitutional
transition.
phrasing
Australia's
transfer
Parliament
of
held
sovereign
a brief
powers
debate
under
with
Regency
opposition
provision.
voices raising Republican
It was a phrase
questions that
only lawyers
supporters
and
of the
royal
Crown stressed
historians
William's
could fully
youth
decode.
and modern touch.
But its meaning was clear.
In New Zealand, the
Charles
Governor
had
General
stepped
issued
back,
a statement
and William
praising
was now the
Catherine by
acting
name,
sovereign.
highlighting her steady
Crowds
hand
began
and
gathering
service-minded
outside the
strength.
palace gates within
By
30
the
minutes
13th
of the
August,
announcement.
William had
Union
already
jacks and
scheduled
Welsh
calls with
flags
leaders of
fluttered
all
above
14
heads as
Commonwealth
chants of
realms.
William, Catherine
Each was intended
rose
to
from the
signal
throng.
continuity.
By noon,
The palace
television
understood
crews
that
from the
unity abroad was
BBC,
as crucial
ITV,
as
and
acceptance
Sky
at
News
home.
were broadcasting
For
live
William,
coverage,
the task was
filling
clear,
screens
to
with
present
shots of
himself
jubilant
not just
faces
as
and
Britain's
waving
sovereign in
flags.
waiting, but as a
Comparisons
monarch
to
for
the
nations
ascension of
worldwide.
Elizabeth II
By
in
the morning of the
1952
13th of
filled flooded the airwaves.
2025.
Though this
Headlines
transition,
around the world
unlike
spoke
hers,
with one
was
voice.
deliberate
A new
and
king
planned.
in all but name.
On social
Television
media,
anchors
the news
replayed the
spread
Windsor
like
ceremony in
wildfire.
loops,
Hashtags
each frame
such as
analyzed for hidden
#King William
meaning. Some
and
commentators
#Her Majesty
described Charles's act as abdication
designate
in
trended within
disguise.
hours.
Others
Opinion
insisted it
polls
was
moved
a
almost
carefully
instantly.
staged apprenticeship
An overnight
designed to
YouGov
smooth the
survey
road
released
ahead.
that evening showed
Within Britain,
81%
the reaction
public
leaned
approval for the
favourable.
decision, with
Polling
even higher
released that
ratings
evening
among younger
showed
voters.
71% of
The mood
respondents
was not
welcomed
just
William's
acceptance,
new role.
it was enthusiasm.
Catherine's
A
approval
rare gift
soared
for a
even
monarchy
higher,
often
reaching
accused
levels
of
not
clinging to
seen
the
since
past.
her wedding in 2011.
Inside the palace, however,
Yet, beneath
the tone
surface,
remained
debate
controlled.
stirred.
William and
Charles weakening
Catherine
the
were
monarchy
advised
by
to keep
stepping
public
aside
appearances
early or
minimal in the
preserving
first
it by
72
ensuring
hours,
stability before
allowing the
crisis
news
struck.
cycle to breathe and the public to
Inside
absorb
Buckingham
the
Palace,
change.
practical
It was a
changes
modern
began at
media
once.
strategy applied to an ancient
William's
institution,
official office was
ensuring the
expanded,
shift
with
in
dozens
power
of
would be
staff
seen as stable,
transferred from Clarence
thoughtful,
House.
and above all,
Catherine received
confident.
her own dedicated
The public
advisory
reaction
team
was immediate
tasked
and
with managing
overwhelmingly
her schedule
positive.
as future
But
queen.
the monarchy does not
Corridors
operate
once
in
dominated
isolation.
by Charles S.
Beyond
aides
the
now
palace
buzzed with
gates,
younger
the
voices,
ripples
many
reached
of them
Downing
William's
Street,
long-trusted
the House of
associates.
Commons, and capitals
Protocol,
across
too,
the
shifted.
Commonwealth.
In
In
all
less than
formal
24
documents,
hours,
William
the
was now
constitutional
referred to
reality
as
in London
His
would
Royal
have to be
Highness,
acknowledged
the King's
in
Principal
Canberra,
Deputy. This
Ottawa,
phrasing,
and
crafted
beyond.
by
The
constitutional
next test of this
lawyers, balanced
transition would not be in the
respect for
streets
Charles while
or on
acknowledging
television.
William's
It would be
authority.
in the formal recognition
Court
by
officials
governments
were
and
instructed
leaders
to treat William's
around the
decisions as
world.
binding, unless
Parliament
directly overruled by the
and
King.
Commonwealth response.
Even ceremonial routines changed.
When the Prime Minister
At
rose to
morning
speak in the
briefings,
House of
Charles
Commons
no
at 2
longer
o'clock
presided
p.m.
at
on
the head of the
11th
table.
August 2025,
Instead, William
the
took
tone
the
was
central
both
chair,
respectful
with Catherine
and
seated
forward-looking.
beside him.
He praised King Charles
sat
for his
quietly to the
humility
side,
and service
offering comments
and
only
welcomed
when
William's
requested.
leadership as a
The
natural
visual shift was
evolution for
subtle
the
yet
monarchy.
undeniable.
His statement
Not
lasted
everyone
just
adjusted
7
easily.
minutes, but it carried the weight of
Longtime
parliamentary
staff who had
acknowledgement
served Charles
that the
for
transfer of
decades
powers
found the
was now
transition
the
disorienting.
constitutional reality of the
Some
United
worried
Kingdom.
aloud that the king had
The
moved
reaction
too
from the
quickly,
Commonwealth
surrendering
Secretariat
not just
was
duties,
swift.
but authority.
Within hours, an
Others
extraordinary
whispered that the
session
palace
was
finally
called to
had fresh
formally
energy
recognize
and
William
that
and
William's
Catherine in their
sharper,
new
more modern
capacities.
approach would restore
Representatives
public
from
confidence.
all 56
By the 14th of August, these
member
whispers
states
reached the press.
were invited to participate
Leaks
via
hinted at a
secure
palace
video
divided
link.
between the old
Key
guard of
realms,
Charles
such as
and
Australia
the new
and
court of
Canada,
William, though
pledged to
officials
send
denied
high-ranking
any rift.
delegations to the
Insiders
coronation
admitted the
once a
speed
date
of
was
change
set,
had left
signaling
some
not just
unsettled.
acknowledgement,
For
but
the monarchy,
active support.
adjusting its own household
At Lambeth
was
Palace,
proving
the
as
Archbishop
delicate
of
as
Canterbury
managing the
confirmed his
nation's
role in both the
perception.
public coronation
As Britain
and a
absorbed the
private
shock,
family
the wider
blessing.
world took
The announcement
notice.
ensured that the
In
religious
Washington,
legitimacy
the
of the
White House
transition
issued a
was as
statement
secure
calling
as the political
handover a
one.
demonstration
For
of
a
unity
monarchy
and
rooted in both
foresight
church
within
and
Britain's
state, this
constitutional
dual
monarchy
assurance was
president.
essential.
Evelyn Ross placed a
Political
personal call to
commentators
William,
noted the smoothness of the
congratulating him
entire
on his
process
new duties
compared
and
to
stressing
past
the
royal
enduring
crises.
friendship between the US
There were no
and the
disputes
United
over
Kingdom.
legality, no
In
visible
Paris,
factionalism
President
within the
Marc
family,
Duval described
and
the
no
transition
delay
as
in
an
parliamentary
historic
or
moment,
Commonwealth
watched with respect
recognition.
By France, German.
The structure
Chancellor
of the
Annika
monarchy
Voigt
had
praised
flexed
William's
without fracturing,
commitment to service,
an
while
outcome
leaders
that,
in
in
Spain,
modern
Italy,
royal
and the
history,
Netherlands sent
was
their
far
own
from
messages of
guaranteed.
goodwill.
Recognition
global tone
from
was
Parliament
clear,
and the Commonwealth
reassurance that
confirmed the
Britain's
transition
monarchy
on
remained
paper.
stable,
But the
even
monarchy's
as it subtly
strength
shifted.
lies as much in
Across
emotion
Europe,
as in
embassies
law.
adjusted their protocol.
For Charles, stepping back from the
Invitations
throne
once
he had
addressed
only
to
held
Charles
since
began arriving with
2022
William's
required
name at the
more than legal
forefront.
documents.
In
It
Ottawa,
required a
the
farewell
Canadian
that the
Parliament
public could
formally
see,
updated
hear,
its
and
order of
feel.
precedence,
That
placing
farewell
William
came not in a
directly
grand
beneath the
hall
Governor-General.
or before a cheering
In
crowd,
Canberra,
but in the
discussions
familiar
turned
setting of
quietly
Windsor,
to whether a
where his
referendum on
voice
the
would
monarchy
carry a
might
father's
resurface,
blessing
though
and a
analysts
monarch's
noted that
final
William
words
and
of
Catherine's
authority.
popularity made such
The
debates
emotional
less
farewell
urgent.
from Charles.
Even in regions where Republican voices were
That
louder,
evening,
the
as the
transition
summer
was
light
treated
faded
with
over Windsor,
seriousness.
King Charles appeared on
Caribbean
television
nations
from the
such
green
as
drawing
Jamaica
room
and
at Windsor
Barbados
Castle.
weighed the news
Wearing a
carefully.
simple dark suit,
Some viewed
he
it
began
as an
by thanking the
opportunity
nation
to press
for its patience through
independence
trials.
from the crown.
Without naming her,
Others suggested
he alluded
that
to the
William's
upheaval
modern
caused
image
by
might
Queen
temporarily
Camilla's
delay
quiet
such
withdrawal from public
Perhaps
life
the
in
most
July
striking foreign
2025.
response came from
His
America.
tone was calm,
Major
deliberate,
networks
and tinged
prepared
tinged
live
with the
panels
fatigue of a
analysing
man
every
who had
detail,
carried the
from
crown for
Catherine's
just over
wardrobe to
3
William's
years.
tone during public remarks.
Midway through the speech,
Headlines
Charles
ran
turned to
with
the
phrases
legacy of
like,
Princess
"A royal
Diana,
rehearsal for
saying,
the crown,"
"Her
and
light
"King in waiting,
continues through
king
her
in
children
practice."
and
Public
grandchildren."
interest spiked.
It was a rare
Streaming
and direct
platforms
acknowledgement
quickly
of her
commissioned
enduring
specials
influence.
on William's
For many
path to
viewers,
kingship,
it was the
while
emotional
talk show
peak
hosts
of the
speculated
address.
about how Catherine
His words
might
seemed to
redefine the
bridge
role of
decades
queen
of history,
consort for a country
connecting the
without a
monarchy's
monarchy.
most turbulent
America's
moments to the
fascination
present
with
day.
this
Monarchy's
royal
most
transition
turbulent
bordered on
moments to
obsession.
the present day,
Meanwhile,
with a simple
European
truth
royals
about
watched with
family
keen
and
attention.
memory. He then
In
offered
Madrid,
his blessing
King
to
Felipe
William and
VI
Catherine,
sent a private
calling
letter to
them
William,
the future
welcoming him
heart
to
of
the
this
fraternity
nation.
of heirs who must
He urged the
sometimes
public
lead
to give
before
them the
their
same
hour
loyalty
arrives in
and patience
Copenhagen.
that had been
Crown
extended
Princess
to
Mary
him.
remarked publicly
The camera
that the weight
lingered
of
on his
duty
face
often
as his
comes
eyes
earlier than
glistened.
expected.
An unguarded
Such
moment that,
gestures
within
underscored a
minutes,
shared
was
understanding.
clipped,
Monarchies
shared,
across
and
Europe faced
replayed
similar pressures
across
of relevance,
every major
image,
news
and
platform
continuity.
in Britain and
Britain's
abroad.
experiment in
By the
handing
time the
power
address
early was
ended,
now a case
Charles's
study for
message
others,
was
a quiet
clear.
lesson playing
This
out
was
on the
not a
world
retreat
stage.
in shame or
While
defeat,
the cameras captured
but a
polished
deliberate
images
step
of
toward
unity,
ensuring
the private
stability.
toll was far more
His reign
complex.
might be recorded in
For
history as
William,
short,
the weight of sudden
but it would be
authority
remembered
settled
as
quickly.
decisive in
Those
securing the
close to him
monarchy's
said he
future.
spent long nights
With
in his
Charles's
study at
farewell
Adelaide
complete,
Cottage,
the path
reading
was now
briefing
clear
papers
for
until
William and
dawn.
Catherine to step
One
into the
aide described
spotlight.
him as calm,
The
but
first
visibly
days of their
carrying the
new
crown
roles would
already.
set the tone for
Catherine,
everything that followed.
meanwhile, balanced
They
her
could have
role
chosen
with
a
quiet
grand
intensity.
balcony appearance or
Every
a glittering
public
state
appearance
banquet,
was dissected in the press,
but instead,
and every gesture
they
toward
selected
William
something
was
quieter,
treated as symbolic
almost
of their partnership.
understated.
Friends
In doing
admitted
so,
she felt
they
the
signaled
strain,
that this
yet
was
she
not just
carried
a
it
change
with
of
poise.
personnel, but a
One
change of
confidant
style,
remarked,
marking
"She
the
knows
beginning
she's
of
no
a reign
longer
grounded
just
in
the
public
Princess of
service
Wales,
over
she is,
pageantry."
in practice, Britain's
The
queen in
first
training.
steps of the new
For
reign.
Charles, the transition cut differently.
On the morning of
At
12
Highgrove, the
August
king walked his gardens in
2025,
long,
William
reflective
and Catherine
circles.
made their first public
Visitors
appearance
noted a
as
man
king
both
designate
relieved and
and
restless.
queen designate.
Though he had
Rather than
spoken
heading to a
openly of
palace
easing his
reception
load,
or foreign
stepping
capital,
aside proved harder
they visited
in
a
practice.
children's hospice in
One
Oxford.
former courtier confided
The visit
he
lasted
wanted
2 hours,
this, but watching
during
William
which they
step
spoke
so
with
fully
patients,
into the role
families, and
leaves him
staff,
asking where he
shaking
still
hands
fits.
and listening
Charles
intently.
continued to meet weekly
It was a
with the Privy
symbolic
Council,
choice,
yet his influence
placing
was
service
clearly
to ordinary
diminished.
people
Where
ahead of
once his
ceremonial
word had set the
grandeur.
tone, now William's voice
During a brief
carried
address
greater weight.
outside the hospice,
For the
William
first
announced
time,
a people
Britain
first
had a
approach
reigning
to the
monarch who
monarchy,
was present,
including
but not
a review
primary.
of ceremonial
Inside
expenses.
the family, the shift
He pledged
rippled in
to scale
uneven
back
ways.
events that cost
Princess
millions
and
and
reportedly
redirect
backed
those
William
funds to
fully,
community
seeing the
projects.
practical necessity
The
of
statement drew
transition.
immediate praise from
Prince Edward
newspapers
expressed
and
support
online
as well,
commentators,
though, with
with
caution,
many calling it a
reminding
bold
confidants
and
that
necessary
every
step
adjustment
for
must
a
be
modern
measured,
monarchy.
lest the monarchy appear divided.
Catherine, meanwhile,
Harry
revealed
and Meghan
plans to
remained
digitize
conspicuously
portions of the
silent.
royal archives,
From California,
including Princess
no
Diana's
official comment
letters
was
and
issued.
speeches.
Tabloids
The initiative would not only
speculated
preserve
about their
them,
private
but
feelings,
make them
but
accessible to the
insiders
public
suggested
for the first
Sussexes
time.
preferred to stay
For
out of the
many,
moment
it was
that
a
not
deeply
theirs to
personal
shape.
move that tied her
Their
own work to
absence,
the legacy
however,
she had been
only
entrusted
fueled
to
more
protect